Okay, so let's look at 2.1. Varieties of meaning. Ordinary language, as most of us are at least vaguely aware, serves various functions in day-to-day life. So we do not just use language to create arguments, right? We do use language for all sorts of purposes. It's more like a tool. We use it to ask questions, tell stories, tell lies, issue commands, greetings, tell jokes, and so on. Variety of different uses for the language. We, of course, are mainly interested in arguments, but nonetheless we should understand how language works overall. Meaning of words. Well, meaning, as you probably know, changes over time. Even in English language. If you look back in time to medieval England, the language will be very different from what it is now. If you find any texts from, 13th century, they're almost incomprehensible. The language they were using back then has very little in common with the common English we use today. The English we use today more or less formed during the 17th century by the time of Elizabeth I and Shakespeare. That's more or less when you find the language we have today. Even then, it was a little bit different. Like if you read Shakespeare, you'll see it's a little weird. You understand it, but it's kind of not exactly how we talk today. In Jane Austen's time, for example, the term mother-in-law referred to stepmothers. So at that time, you would not be surprised to hear something like this. John sat in his mother-in-law's lap while she read him a story. Now today you'd probably wonder what the hell is wrong with John. But back then it was considered quite alright, because John could have been 5 years old, right? A stepchild. So meaning does change over time. Not as much, but it changes over time. Now, it also changes from place to place. Again, I spent quite some time in England. Of course, they speak English language. That's where English language came from. But there is still some variety with American English. Lots of words are different. For example, instead of garbage here, we say garbage. They say rubbish. Right? There's a whole range of words they're using which is different. Some words they're using actually sound the same, but they have different meaning, such as the word football. The book gives an example with football. In America, we think of football as American football. But in Europe, they actually call what we call here soccer, they call it football. They never even use the word soccer. They wouldn't understand you if you talk about soccer. So suppose a little boy called Peter is American, his father is American, and he plays soccer, but he is not allowed to play American football. Now, his father, who is an American, would say, Peter does not play football, right? But say he has British grandparents, and they would say, no, Peter does play football. And they both will be saying something true, wouldn't they? Or would they? So, is meaning relative? How can we then evaluate arguments if meaning is relative? Okay, so in logic we actually talk about the meaning not of sentences but of propositions. What are the propositions? Now here's two examples of sentences, number 1 and number 2, so you could understand concept of a proposition a little bit better. Grass is green and трава зеленая. Note that I'm using Russian example. It actually used to be German example, but some students were saying, "Oh, you're Russian. Why are you not saying Russian? It would be so cool." So I changed it. So now it's in Russian. Doesn't matter. It means exactly the same thing as grass is green in English. So the meaning is exactly the same, right? So we say the proposition is that meaning. And the meaning, note that it actually refers to some sort of a plant called grass, and it attaches some sort of a color to it, which is green. So you may say it in Russian, English, German, French, Japanese. It it would still refer to the same state of affairs in this world. The fact that the grass has a particular color, and this color is what we call green in English, right? So that is the preposition. The preposition does not change. The preposition is what kind of joins these two sentences, what stands behind them, that meaning. And that meaning does not change. If someone said to and you didn't understand, it would be appropriate for your bilingual friend to translate it, right? And she would have told you what the Russian speaker said. You would have understood that preposition. Now, suppose the grass is actually red, then you would say that is incorrect, right? Once you understood the meaning of it, you would be able to assess whether or not it is the correct fact, whether the preposition is true. And this is what we are saying about preposition. The truth or falsity of prepositions is not relative. The fact that the grass is green is either true or false in every single language. And it doesn't matter what language you are using. So, same thing with Peter plays football. You may disagree about how to express that, but the fact remains that he plays one game and he does not play the other game, and those are two different prepositions. If one of them says that he plays football, meaning American football, and the different preposition would be if somebody says he plays football and means soccer. Now, one of them naturally would be true, the other one would be false, but not because of some misunderstanding, but because he does play one game and he does not play the other game. Okay. Now, cognitive and emotive meaning. Terminology that conveys information is said to have cognitive meaning. On the other hand, terminology that expresses or evokes feelings is said to have emotive meaning. Both types of meaning are usually present in emotively charged statements and need to be disengaged. So even emotively charged statement would have some sort of cognitive meaning there. However, primarily cognitive would often have very, very little, if any, emotive. But emotive would always have at least some cognitive. So we should be able to disengage them because we want to look at the argument itself rather than the emotions. So let's look at these two statements. What do you think is different about them? The death penalty, which is legal in 31 states, has been carried out most often in Virginia. However, since 1977, Texas holds the record for the greatest number of executions. And the other one is death penalty is cruel and inhumane form of punishment in which helpless prisoners are dragged from their cells and summarily slaughtered only to satiate bloodthirst of a vengeful public. Can you see the difference between them? Well, again, they kind of both convey some information, but one of them, note that it has no emotion, indeed, yeah. It's like primarily cognitive meaning. It just gives you information. We can't even say whether the first person is for or against death penalty. Who knows? They give you facts. How about the second one? Can you say if they're for or against death penalty? Yeah, clearly against. So their emotion is just shining through. And it does have what we may call, again in logic, a value claim. And the value claim in the second one would be that death penalty is bad. We'll talk about value claims in a moment. So this is an important difference. First one doesn't have any value claims. It doesn't try to tell you whether death penalty is good or bad. It just gives you some facts. Second one, first of all, has a value claim, and second of all, has all this emotionally charged word. Cruel, inhumane, helpless, dragged, slaughtered, bloodthirst, vengeful. All these words have the strong emotive meaning. Okay, now value claim. This is important to understand the proper definition of what value claim is. Something is said to be good, bad, right, wrong, bad or worse, more important or less important than some other thing. It may seem straightforward, but when we do examples, you guys will see how quickly you forget and how easily you are confused about that. So again, a value claim is something that is good, bad, right, wrong, better, worse, more important or less important. Typically good or bad. Right or wrong would be a variation of good or bad. Better, worse, again, variation of good or bad. So essentially, that's what it is. You should be aware that when value claims are couched in emotive terminology, the emotive closing tends to obscure the fact that value claim has been made. Simultaneously gives you psychological momentum to that claim. Like you are swayed to accept whatever they want you to accept without using logic, using your reasoning capacity. You swallow the value claim, sometimes without any evidence, or at least that's the purpose. So we in logic must be able to disengage value claim of emotively charged statements from the emotive meaning and treat them separately. Okay, let's do an exercise. Let's see if you can find the value claim here. How does anyone who's seen even one photo of fly-covered starving children in Somalia can still believe in loving, ever-present, omnipotent God is beyond intelligent reasoning? So remember the definition of a value claim. What is a value claim here? Wait, God does not exist. That's a matter of fact. He either does exist or he does not exist. How is it a value claim? Beyond intelligent reasoning. Are they saying God is beyond intelligent reasoning? Actually, what they mean is it's beyond intelligent reasoning. How can anyone believe in God? But that still is not the value claim. Again, remember the definition of a value claim. What is a value claim? Whether God is loving, ever-present, and omnipotent is again a matter of fact. He either is or he is not. Remember, value claim is not their main point. The value claim is the value claim. God is bad? Is that what they're saying? Are they saying God is bad? Aren't they kind of wondering whether God even exists? Well, you're asking a question there, or are you saying? Okay, well, yeah, so Brian more or less gave the correct answer. The kid starving is what is bad or wrong. Wrong or bad doesn't matter. That's what the value claim is. How is that value claim? Well, think about it. The fact that they're starving is the fact. But when we say it is bad that they're starving or it is wrong that they're starving, we are making a value claim. And note that actually that's not a fact at all because, just to play devil's advocate, somebody can say, no, it's actually good. It's very good. Like the survival of the species. Capitalism, that's what it's all about. The weaklings should die. And of course you can say, well, how can you say that? But note that there's no logical contradiction here. It's not a matter of fact. It's not like whether they are starving or not. Whether they're starving or not is a fact. We can check that. We can go there, find out. Can you find out whether it's good or bad that they're starving? No. You can only make a value claim about it based on what? Based on your morals, based on your convictions. And that's why it is a value claim, because it's based on your values. It's not a fact. So that is the fact, the value claim. The value claim is that it is bad that they are starving and covered with flies. You have to look through the whatever wording there is to figure out what the value claim is. The God, this is more or less they are trying to tell you that if you believe that, you should not believe in God. However, that's not a value claim at all. That as the existence of God is, of course, a matter of fact and not a matter of value. It's not like God exists for me but doesn't exist for you. Either God exists or he doesn't, right? That's not relative from person to person. I may believe in it, you may not believe in it. However, the fact whether there is God is still there, and it still is something that is absolutely objective. Anyway, Uh, Use of emotive terminology of arguments. Again, emotive terminology allows the arguer to make value claims about the subject matter of the argument without providing evidence. So very often people deliberately do that. Why? They may not have any evidence. In general, supporting the value claim is difficult because many value claims are depend on your personal convictions. So again, if somebody is saying starving children is bad and another person saying it is good, well, it's pretty hard to, prove that. It's not like 2 plus 2 equals 4. You may believe that's bad, he or she may believe it is good, and you will argue for days about that. So what they do is they use emotive terminology and then try to convince this way. But very often that is done because there is no sufficient evidence to support something. And we should definitely be able to disengage the value claim, understand first of all it is a value claim rather than a question of fact, and understand that it's been supported by emotion rather than the facts. There's one of the examples in the book how we can evaluate whatever passage based on this. So this is a passage from, a letter or something to an editor of a newspaper saying, now that we know the rocks on the moon are similar to those in our backyard and tadpoles can exist in weightless environment, and now that we have put the rest of the world in order, can we concentrate on the problems here at home, like what makes people hungry and why is unemployment so elusive? Again, note that this is how people usually talk. And it is a little difficult to immediately understand that there are value claims here. Now, let's look at it a little more carefully. So what exactly is going on? First of all, what is this person trying to say? What is their main point? Exactly, here in US, not human level. They're saying we should spend money here in US. We should not be spending them on space, and we should not spending them on other countries. That is their main point. But they're not just saying that, they again using some sort of emotive language. Stuff like rocks and tadpoles in weightless environment. So is that what we are doing in outer space? Is this all that's about? Well, obviously not, right? It has much more of a purpose than that, but they deliberately trying to minimize that and say it's a waste of money. That's their point, basically, that it's a waste of money. But we shouldn't waste money on outer space. Same thing with other countries. They're saying putting the rest of the world in order. The language they're using is similar to what you use when you talk about your room, like putting my room in order, right? However, note that it has a very different level of importance. Whether your room is in order, well, it's nice when it's in order. But whether the world is in order, that of course is on a totally different level of importance. If the world is not in order, we can all die, for one thing, just to put it bluntly. If your room is not in order, well, it's probably just not going to be nice to live in, but it's not going to be that dreadful. Unless you spill in some dangerous chemicals there or something, which probably is not the case. Okay, so they're saying, well, no, they're not saying on Earth. They're saying here at home. This is their precise words. Look, problems here at home. I don't think by home they mean Earth, because they are saying the rest of the world. And the rest of the world is not the moon. The rest of the world is Somalia, the rest of the world is India, all these developing countries. So they're saying we should not be spending money there, we should spend money here, and what makes people hungry, why is unemployment so elusive in our country. So essentially this is their main point. What are their value claims? If you remember the value claims, the definition, you can figure it out. Yes, the things like hunger and unemployment here at home are more important than outer space and more important than whatever disorder we have in other countries. So there are two value claims that, first of all, compared to outer space, things here at home are more important. And second, compared to other countries, the rest of the world, what's happening here at home is more important. That's the two value claims here. So if we lay it out properly, that would more or less look like something like this. The space program has been confined to work on ordinary rocks and tadpoles. Ordinary rocks and tadpoles are less important than domestic hunger and unemployment. One value claim. Our international efforts restored order to every nation on earth but our own. These efforts have been directed to problems that are less important than our domestic problems. Value claim number 2. And finally, the conclusion, our government should redirect funds that have been spent on these projects to solving our own domestic problems. This is obviously what the purpose of the whole thing is. This is their main point. Spend money here rather than in the rest of the world or in space. Okay. Very often this is what we can see used in advertisement. Couple of examples in the book. If you are facing criminal prosecution, hiring an aggressive and experienced defense attorney who has a proven record and of ability and skill should be a first priority. An inadequate defense could cost you everything. That's why you need John Jacobson. So again, note that they are obviously using emotive language here a lot. Aggressive, proven record, ability, cost you everything. That plays on the emotion of a person who's reading it. They then tell you to use John Jacobson. Note that there's really no argument here. Why should you use Joe Jacobson rather than, say, Peter Peterson or, Alan Allenson? In all these cases, they may be pretty good attorneys. All it basically proves is that you should have one. But, of course, they probably have a phone number right there. And if you call this number, they will sell you their services. So that happens very often in advertisement. In general, advertisement is typically based on some sort of fallacies, as we will see throughout the class. And of course, they very rarely want to provide you with the facts, and you know that. When you watch advertisement, how often do you hear numbers? How often do you hear them proving that they're better than competition? No, they just have people dancing, cool stuff happening, and that's how they want you to buy their product. That's basically what it's based on. Anyway, this is the sum of the examples. Now, don't get the idea that emotions are bad. We are not trying to say that at all. Emotionally loaded language can interfere with logical insight, but it does not mean that arguments should always be expressed in emotionally neutral language. It obviously would sound very boring, especially if you make in some sort of public speech, as you will also learn in communications classes. You may want to spice it up a little bit, make it interesting. In fact, there is a good quote here from David Kelly's book, Art of Reasoning, which says, if you have a logical argument to back up a conclusion, there is nothing wrong with stating it in such a way that your audience will endorse it with their feelings as well as with their intellects. So, nothing wrong with that. The point there is that very often it's not to support the logical argument, it's to replace it. People doing it because they have no argument, or their argument is really bad, and they stuff it up with this emotive words just to confuse you and to make you accept something without thinking too much about it, right? So that's exactly why we should be able to disengage it and evaluate both. Like say, okay, this is the emotion. Let's put it aside for a minute. Let's look at the logic here. Are they actually proving it? Do they actually have facts? Use our reasoning to evaluate the facts and evaluate their argument on its own. Okay, let's do an extra credit exercise. Now, that's a good exercise, cognitive and emotive meaning. Now, basically, I can be rather flexible about the result, but this is what I'm looking for from you for both of them. They both, I can tell you, have one premise, one conclusion. So first thing, you have to structure it kind of like this. This example, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Well, since they only have 1 and 2, you should put 1, whatever the premise is, and 2 would be your conclusion, therefore blah blah. Remember what the conclusion is. That's the main point. So you should separate that and remove the emotive language from that. State it in kind of a more plain, simple language we use. Because even though there's not a lot of it, but there is some emotive language. You can immediately see that some words you would not use it in, for example, if you were writing a document of some sort. So try that. And whoever comes reasonably close to the correct answer, I'll give the extra credit. And the first person who gives me, well, not the exact wording, but at least, so that I could see that you are reasonably close. Okay, well, first of all, you have to answer both, right? There's two of them. Second of all, remember, you have to remove the emotive language, not just repeat what they are saying. Saying that something is wrong makes it a value claim. I'm not sure that's a value claim here either. The question is not what's the value claim. The question is what's their conclusion. Okay, well, I guess I can accept this answer from Elizabeth because it is reasonably close. So yeah, for one thing, you should definitely replace the word lousy. Lousy clearly is a emotive word. People who leave it there are not paying attention. Bad record is much better than lousy record. When somebody says something is lousy, clearly they are trying to stir up emotion here. Now, so China has a bad past record with human rights, therefore it should not be given the most favored nation status. That would be the first one. Second one, the lottery involves making a small investment with possibility of return. I don't know about substantial, that also seemed like they already using emotion, but fine. And the conclusion, of course, there's nothing wrong with playing the lottery. Playing the lottery is not an issue. I don't know if it's a good way to put it in English, but like I said, I will accept it. So Elizabeth gets extra credit. Okay, this would be your fourth extra credit. Now, yeah. So this is more or less what I was looking for. Again, note that many of you guys for some reason did not get what the conclusion was in number 3. Conclusion is the main point. And the conclusion, of course, here is nothing wrong with playing the lottery. That's what they're trying to tell you. That is their main point. You're taking a risk. Well, how is that? How could it even be a main point? You're taking a risk, small risk. That's one of the reasonings they're giving you why the conclusion that playing the lottery is a good idea is their final conclusion. Yeah, so be careful about that. Anyway, we'll do more exercises later. Now, vagueness and ambiguity. We will use that for definitions later on, so it's important to understand the difference. We all know these words, but we don't usually think about what do they exactly mean, what exactly is vagueness, and what exactly is ambiguity, and what's the difference. We say vague expression is the one which allows for borderline cases in which it is impossible to tell if the expression applies or does not apply. So, examples: rich, poor, normal, conservative, and so on. Let me give you one of them. Just let's look at rich. Borderline cases. We all know what rich means, right? Person has a lot of money. But where's the borderline between rich and the poor? It's not easy to draw this line, is it? Who's rich, who's poor? Okay, person who has $1 billion clearly is rich, and person who has no money at all is clearly poor. But suppose somebody has $10,000. Is it rich or poor? Well, probably poor. How about 11,000? 12, 13, 15? Is there a line? Can you say a person who has $500,000 is rich, but $499,999 is already poor? No, there's no clear line. Same thing with the words such as tall. We all can say that somebody who's 7 feet tall is tall, and somebody who's 5 feet tall is small. But where's the line? Can you say that person who is 6.6 is small and 6.7 is tall? No, there's no clear line. It's like blurred. It's somewhere in between. Somewhere. We can't really say that. Bold. Another great example in logic, we often use it. Who's bold? Okay, you have a lot of hair. Great. Now, at some point, you don't have much left. Clearly, you are bold. But is there a day when you like have all this hair and then one more hair falls off and you become bald? No. Clearly, there's no clear line there. So, even though we understand the meaning of the word very well, but we don't know where to draw this line. Here's another example from the book. We will only hire good candidates for the job. Why is that, again, vague? Well, once again, you can kind of understand who is the good candidate, right? But where's the line, a clear line between a good candidate and a bad candidate? Suppose you have two well-qualified candidates. Which one of them is good? Which one of them is bad? Well, if one of them is clearly unqualified, then he will be bad. But to draw this line is extremely difficult. You really can't. You can just say, well, one of them is better than the other, but whether they may be both good or both bad, that's again not a very, very clear line. Okay. Ambiguity, on the other hand. Ambiguity is different. In ambiguity, you have a range of very different meanings. Such as the example, he lies in his grave. The word lies. One very clear meaning here would be that he's prostrate on a horizontal surface, right? Lies. He lies in his grave. But suppose that person you're talking about was a habitual liar throughout his life. He told a lot of falsehoods. So you may have this other meaning when you're saying it. He lies in his grave. Like he's still telling falsehoods in his grave. Note that the meaning is completely different. This is no longer the case of like you don't know where to draw the line. You know where to draw the line. Those are different words. The word is the same but different meaning. Okay. So the words such as light, proper, critical, stress, mad, inflate, chest, bank, sound, they can all have these multiple meanings which are different, and sometimes you can't say which one it is. Light Pilsner. Is it light in color? Is it light in calories? Or is it light in taste? Which one is it? Those are three different meanings. Sometimes the whole statements again can be ambiguous, and they usually are funny. That's good way to see ambiguity. If something seems funny to you, college students are turned into vegetables. That's like from the newspaper headlines. College students are turned into vegetables. Are they talking about students like literally becoming vegetables, or are they just saying they eat more vegetables? Tuna are biting off Washington coast. Now, again, the question here is, do they mean that fishermen are catching tuna off the coast, or are they talking about tuna like literally nibbling at the coast? Note that again, those are two different meanings. So, difference again between vagueness and ambiguity. Vague expression has a blur of meaning. We understand what the word means, we just don't know where to draw the line. Ambiguous expression mixes up clear meanings. And some words can be both, as you probably can imagine. The word rich. The word rich, we looked at it from the point of view of vagueness, right? Rich, the person who has a lot of money. But note that rich can also mean rich in calories, right? If you're talking about food. Oh, this is very rich. Well, you don't mean that the food has a lot of money. You mean the food has a lot of calories. So some words can be both. Now, verbal and factual disputes. Another good distinction which we should understand. Verbal dispute. What would be a verbal dispute? That's the disputes that arise over the meaning of language. Here's an example. Brenda says, I'm afraid that Smiley is guilty of arson. Last night he confided to me that he was the one who set fire to old schoolhouse. And Warren says, no, you couldn't be more mistaken. In this country no one is guilty until proven so in a court of law, and Smiley has not yet even been accused of anything. Now, at first you may wonder, why is it verbal? And think about it. What Brenda is saying is that he committed this crime, therefore he is guilty. What Warren is saying, he's not disputing the fact that he committed the crime, but he's saying we can only call him guilty once the court establishes that he is guilty, even though he may have committed the crime, which again Warren does not dispute. We cannot call him guilty yet. So this is the difference between the meaning of the word guilty. Is guilty mean a person who committed the crime, or is guilty means the person who has been pronounced as such by the court of law, which are, of course, two different meanings. Factual dispute, that's of course easier. Here is an example of factual dispute. That's disputes about the fact. Keith says, I know that Freddy stole a computer from an old schoolhouse. Barbara told me that she saw Freddy do it. And Phyllis says, that's ridiculous. Freddy has never stolen anything in his life. Barbara hates Freddy, and she's trying to pin the theft on him only to shield her criminal boyfriend. So, in this case, they dispute in the fact. Did he or did he not take the computer? They rather in agreement, it seems, about what it means to steal the computer. That means to take it secretly without anybody knowing so. But nonetheless, they are disputing whether he did that. And that's a factual dispute. Okay, so let's do our exercises now. Like I said, there will be quite a few of them, and we'll take some time to do them properly. First one is on value claims. Read this passage and give me two answers. I need two things from you. First one, identify the conclusion. What is the conclusion here? And second, identify the value claim. The conclusion is obviously that we should pass the bill. That's what they are trying to argue. That's their main point. Now, value claim is that killing children is bad. So this is kind of based on killing children. Abortion is bad. I guess I can let it slide. But in this case, that is more or less what they are saying. Yeah, killing children is bad. Abortion is killing children, and therefore abortion is bad too. This is, yeah, okay. So this is, Elizabeth, this is your last extra credit, by the way. Number 5. Now you have the maximum. So you may want to let others get extra credit too. But yeah, so value claim, it is wrong or bad to kill innocent children. Alright, let's move to the disputes. So the disputes, now listen to the explanation though. First of all, in some cases, you can have both a verbal and a factual dispute. In some cases, you can have just a factual dispute. In some cases, just a verbal. Every time you have a verbal, it will be arising out of vagueness or out of ambiguity. So this is two disputes. You have to give me an answer for both of them, and the answer would be either factual or verbal, in which case you should give me ambiguity or vagueness, or both, in which case again you should give me ambiguity or vagueness for verbal part. Okay, so read through them, 3 and 11. I need these answers for both of them for extra credit. Okay, Eric gave a correct answer. So the top one is obviously factual, very easy one. How many points? So the second one, verbal, but the question whether it's vagueness or ambiguity, well, they disagree about what? What metaphysics means. Is it something to do with magic or ghosts, or is it something else? Now, clearly, in this case, it's the ambiguity. Vagueness would have been if they agreed on the meaning, but they just don't know where to draw the line there, where one ends and the other one begins. And that's not the case in this situation. So, Eric, that's your third extra credit. Okay. Now let's do another one. That one may be a little bit more difficult. Exactly the same question. So could be factual, could be verbal, could be both. And if it is verbal or if it is both, you have to tell me vagueness or ambiguity. So if you think number 6 is factual, basically what you're saying is they disagree whether she attended college. Do they disagree over the facts here? So number 5 is combination. It's both. It's factual and it's verbal from ambiguity. The factual question is whether there is afterlife, right? That's the factual question. Verbal ambiguity, where does exactly, what does death exactly mean? Does it mean the moment when the heart stops? Does it mean the moment when the soul leaves the body? Those are two different meanings. So that's again verbal on top of factual. Now, number 6 is verbal from ambiguity because they are disputing the meaning of the word educated. What does educated means? It's not that they don't know where to draw the line. Heidi is obviously suggesting that she attended a lecture on the life of Jane Austen. She was educated, meaning by the life itself, right? As education, something you learn in life. Now, David has a totally different definition of education. Somebody who got a degree from high school, college, or another institution. So they don't argue whether it ends where it begins. They argue what it means. And so in this case, that would be ambiguity. Yeah. So good job, Karen. That is your 4th extra credit. Okay. Well, now hopefully you got a good grasp on it. So let's do one more. This one is the same principle as before. A little more tricky. May take a few tries, but think about it. Okay. Yeah, Roosevelt finally gave the correct answer. So this one is verbal, arising from ambiguity, and this one, both of them, and the verbal part is arising from vagueness. You may wonder how is that the case. Well, the answers are actually coming from the book. I'm not making them up. So the verbal from ambiguity does euthanasia refer to passive measures to end life or active measures. So in other words, the meaning of word euthanasia. Note that the way Carl puts it, he's saying, well, they're not really doing anything, right? They're just disconnecting them and they dying on their own. So that's kind of a passive measure. But Sergio is saying, no, they actually are killing them. So they are actively causing their death. And this is two different meanings of the word euthanasia. Now, second one is even trickier than that, because that one actually does have both. Verbal is from vagueness, the word music, where the music ends and the noise begins. You can say that music is, of course, type of a noise anyways, but where is that noise still music and when that noise becomes just noise? Now, how do you draw the line here? We can all kind of clearly say that if something is noise, just that's just noise. We can all clearly say that something is music, it is music. But sometimes it's kind of hard to draw this line. What's factual here? Well, Cheryl claims that Metallica makes good sounds, and Oliver claims that it does not. Yeah, the vagueness is when you cannot draw the line. That's what vagueness is.